My name is Rachel Morgan, and for 8 years, I've been financially supporting my parents while they complained I never helped the family. The pattern started small. Mom called when I was 24, fresh out of grad school with my first real job. "Honey, we're a bit short on the electric bill this month. Could you help with $150? I sent $150. It was never just that month. By year 2, I was covering their utilities, $380 monthly. By year 3, I'd added their car insurance, $240 monthly. By year 4, their property taxes were behind and I paid the $8,400 bill. By year 8, now at age 32, I'd sent my parents $427,000 over 8 years. Mortgage assistance when dad's consulting work dried up. Medical bills when mom needed surgery. Car repairs. Home repairs. Emergency after emergency after emergency. I documented everything. Every wire transfer. Every check. Every Venmo payment. Spreadsheets color-coded by category with running totals and dates. $427,000 in 8 years. They never said thank you. Not once. Instead, at every family gathering, mom would sigh and say things like, "We've sacrificed so much for our children. We gave Rachel everything. Sometimes I wish she understood what we went through." Dad would add, "Your mother and I worked ourselves to the bone. We put you through college. We gave up our dreams so you could have yours." And I'd sit there having just sent them $3,200 that week and say nothing. Because I was conducting an experiment. I wanted to see if they'd ever acknowledge what I was doing. If gratitude would eventually overcome their need to be seen as martyrs. 8 years. They never acknowledged it once. What they also didn't know, while I was sending them $427,000, they were stealing an additional $189,000 from me through credit card fraud. Cards opened in my name. Forged signatures. My credit destroyed while they bought furniture, took vacations, and remodeled their kitchen with money I never authorized. I discovered the fraud 2 months ago. I hired a forensic accountant who spent 6 weeks documenting everything. And I planned my confrontation carefully. Christmas dinner. When they'd have an audience. When they'd feel safe making their usual speeches about sacrifice and ungrateful children. That's when I'd show them the truth. I grew up in suburban Chicago, the only child of 2 people who saw parenthood as an endless sacrifice worthy of eternal gratitude. My father, Thomas Morgan, worked in sales, or tried to. He'd had 6 different jobs by the time I graduated high school, always claiming his employers didn't appreciate his talents. My mother, Linda, was a stay-at-home mom who treated raising 1 child as if she'd personally ended world hunger. "I gave up my career for you," she'd say, though she'd never actually had a career. She'd worked retail for 2 years before I was born. They lived beyond their means my entire childhood. Big house with a struggling mortgage. New cars every 3 years on loans they couldn't afford. Vacations charged to credit cards they never paid off. By the time I left for college, they had $140,000 in credit card debt. But they blamed circumstances. Bad luck. The economy. Unfair employers. Never their own spending. "We spent everything on you," Mom would say when I questioned their finances. Private school. Dance lessons. College prep courses. Everything we had went to giving you opportunities. Except it didn't. I went to public school. I never took dance lessons. I did community college for 2 years before transferring to state school on scholarships I earned myself. But they rewrote history to cast themselves as martyrs. I worked 3 jobs through college. I graduated with a degree in data analytics and a job offer from a major consulting firm for $72,000 a year. Mom's reaction, "That's nice, honey. I hope you remember that we made all of this possible." Dads, don't forget who supported you while you were in school. They'd supported me by letting me live at home for 2 years of community college, during which I'd paid them $400 monthly rent and bought my own food. I moved to Chicago for my job, got a modest apartment, and started saving aggressively. I lived on $2,500 monthly and invested the rest. That's when the request started. "Honey, the water heater broke. Can you help with $800? Dad's car needs new transmission. Just $1,200. The property taxes are due and we're short. Could you cover $4,200 this year?" I helped every time. Because they were my parents. Because I was succeeding and they were struggling. Because that's what family does. But the requests never came with gratitude. They came with expectation. With entitlement. With reminders that I owed them for my existence. By age 27, I'd been promoted twice. My salary hit $135,000. I bought investment properties. I built a stock portfolio worth $480,000. My net worth crossed $1 million by age 30. But I still drove a used Honda. Still lived in that modest apartment. Still brought lunch to work. Because I was supporting two households. Mine and my parents. At family gatherings, the guilt trips intensified. Your father and I never travel anymore, Mom would announce. We spent all our money on Rachel's education. We have nothing left for ourselves. Some children take care of their aging parents, Dad would say loudly. But we're fortunate Rachel has her career. We're so proud. Even if it means we sacrifice in our golden years. I'd sent them $4,800 that month. But I said nothing. I documented everything. I waited. 8 years of waiting. Then 2 months ago my credit card company flagged my account for suspicious activity. Ms. Morgan, we're seeing charges that seem unusual. A $4,800 purchase at Ashley Furniture in Naperville. A $3,200 transaction at a travel agency. Do these look familiar? No. These are on a Capital One card in your name. Are you aware of this account? I don't have a Capital One card. That's when I discovered the fraud. 3 credit cards in my name I didn't open. Total balance, $67,000. I called a forensic accountant named David Richardson who specialized in family fraud cases. This is systematic, David said after reviewing my credit report. Someone with access to your personal information has been opening accounts and making purchases for years. How much total? I'll need 6 weeks to trace everything. But preliminarily, I'm seeing evidence of $150,000 to $200,000 in fraudulent debt. He came back with the final report 2 weeks ago. Total fraudulent debt in my name, $189,000. All of it traceable to my parents. The cards had been shipped to their address. The purchases were at stores near their house. The payment history showed they'd been making minimum payments using money I'd sent them for emergencies. They'd been stealing from me while I was supporting them. While they called me ungrateful. I had David prepare a full presentation. Documentation. Photos. Forensic analysis. Everything. And I waited for Christmas. While my parents were stealing from me and guilt-tripping me, I was quietly building wealth they couldn't imagine. My consulting career flourished. By age 28, I'd made senior analyst at $155,000 annually. By 30, I was promoted to project director at $205,000. But my real wealth came from investing every dollar I didn't send to my parents. I bought my first rental property at 26, a 2-bedroom condo in a developing neighborhood. $40,000 down, $1,600 monthly rent against a $1,100 mortgage. Positive cash flow of $500 monthly. I bought a second property at 28. A third at 29. By 32, I owned 5 rental properties with $680,000 in equity and $2,800 in monthly cash flow. My stock portfolio had grown to $920,000 through aggressive saving and smart investing. Total net worth, $1.8 million. But my parents had no idea. They thought I was a mid-level consultant making decent money, living modestly with no major assets. They had no idea I'd built wealth that dwarfed anything they'd ever have, while simultaneously funding their lifestyle. At Thanksgiving last year, Mom had sighed dramatically. I just wish Rachel understood what real sacrifice looks like. She's so focused on her career. So focused on herself. We never put ourselves first, Dad agreed. Everything we did was for her. But some children never learn to give back. I'd sent them $5,200 that week for their furnace replacement. But I smiled and said nothing. Because I was waiting for Christmas. For the perfect moment. For the confrontation I'd been planning for 2 months. Christmas dinner was at my parents' house in Naperville. The guest list included Mom, Dad, my Aunt Carol, Uncle Stephen, and my 2 cousins. I arrived at 4 o'clock carrying wine and a homemade dessert. Mom greeted me with her usual air kiss. Rachel. So glad you could take time from your busy career to join us. Wouldn't miss it, Mom. Dinner was served at 6. Turkey, stuffing, all the traditional sides. Small talk about weather and neighborhood gossip. Then, as dessert was being served, Mom cleared her throat. I want to say something before we finish tonight. Everyone turned to her. Your father and I have been reflecting on this past year. On our lives. On what we've sacrificed. Here we go, I thought. We gave Rachel everything, Mom continued, her voice getting emotional. Private education. Public school, Mom. Expensive activities. I paid for my own activities. College tuition. I had scholarships and worked 3 jobs. Mom's face flushed. Rachel, please. I'm trying to make a point. What's your point? My point is that your father and I sacrificed everything for you. We gave up our dreams. We spent our money. We worked ourselves to the bone. And sometimes, just sometimes, I wish you understood what that meant. Dad jumped in. Your mother's right. We never ask for recognition. We never complain. But Rachel, you're 32 years old now. You have a good career. You make good money. And yet what? And yet you never sacrifice for this family, Mom said, her voice cracking. You never give back. You never help. You're so focused on building your own life that you've forgotten about the people who made that life possible. The room went quiet. Aunt Carol looked uncomfortable. My cousins stared at their plates. We sacrificed everything for you, Dad added. Everything. And you give us nothing in return. I set down my fork carefully. Is that what you think? That I give you nothing? Well, not nothing, Mom backpedaled slightly. But Rachel, we're struggling. Your father's consulting work isn't steady. I have medical expenses. We're barely making ends meet. And you have so much. We just wish you'd help your family. Help you, I repeated. Yes. Help us. Sacrifice for us the way we sacrificed for you. I pulled out my phone. What day is it today? December 25th. What does that? December 25th, 2024. And you're saying I've never helped you? Never sacrificed for you. That's what we're saying. I stood up. I need to get something from my car. I'll be right back. I walked out to my car and retrieved my briefcase. The one I'd packed specifically for this moment. When I returned, I also had David Richardson with me. He'd been waiting in his car as planned. Everyone, this is David Richardson, I said. He's a forensic accountant I hired 2 months ago. David has some information to share about family sacrifice. Mom's face went pale. Rachel, what is this? This is the truth, Mom. Something this family seems to have trouble with. David set his briefcase on the dining table and pulled out a folder. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the intrusion on Christmas, but Ms. Morgan asked me to present these findings in a family setting. He opened the first folder and pulled out a bound report. Over the past 8 years, Rachel Morgan has provided financial support to her parents totaling $427,000. The room went completely silent. That breaks down to approximately $53,400 annually, or $4,450 monthly, though the amounts varied by need. He pulled out detailed spreadsheets and placed them on the table. Mortgage assistance. $168,000 over 8 years when Mr. Morgan's consulting income was insufficient. Utility payments. $36,480, $380 monthly for 96 months. Insurance payments. $23,040, car and home insurance when payments were missed. Property tax payments. $42,000, covering 5 years when payments were late or missed entirely. Medical expenses. $67,000, co-pays, deductibles and procedures not covered by insurance. Emergency expenses. $90,480, car repairs, home repairs, appliance replacements and other urgent needs. He laid each category's documentation on the table. Total. $427,000 in documented financial support over 8 years. All from Ms. Morgan to her parents. Aunt Carol's mouth was hanging open. My cousins looked stunned. Mom found her voice. We didn't ask for all that. Actually, you did, I said quietly. I have 8 years of text messages and emails. Every request. Every emergency. Every guilt trip about how you sacrificed for me. David continued. Now the second part of my findings. He opened another folder. This one was thicker. While Ms. Morgan was providing $427,000 in support, her parents were simultaneously committing identity theft and credit card fraud. Dad started to stand. Now wait just a... Sit down, Mr. Morgan. These are federal crimes we're discussing. Dad sat. David pulled out credit card statements. 3 credit cards opened in Rachel Morgan's name without her authorization. Capital One, Chase and Discover. Total fraudulent charges, $67,000. 4 personal loans from online lenders using Rachel's information, $52,000. Unauthorized charges on Rachel's legitimate credit cards, cards that were reported stolen but had been taken by Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, $48,000. Forged checks on Rachel's checking account, $22,000. He spread the evidence across the table like a prosecutor presenting a case. Total fraudulent debt incurred in Rachel's name, $189,000. He pulled out photos next. Security camera footage from stores. My parents making purchases with cards in my name. This is Mr. Morgan at Ashley Furniture, charging $4,800 to a Capital One card in Rachel's name. This is Mrs. Morgan at a travel agency, booking a $3,200 cruise using a Chase card in Rachel's name. This is both of them at Home Depot, spending $6,400 on kitchen renovation materials using Rachel's credit. Photo after photo. Evidence after evidence. Combined total, David concluded, Rachel provided $427,000 in legitimate support while her parents stole an additional $189,000 through fraud. That's $616,000 over 8 years. The silence in the room was crushing. David pulled out one more document. I've filed a report with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The case is currently under review for federal prosecution. Wire fraud, identity theft, bank fraud. The potential sentences range from 15 to 30 years in federal prison. Mom started crying. Dad's face had gone gray. Rachel, Mom sobbed. Please. We can explain. We were desperate. We didn't mean. You didn't mean to steal $189,000 from your daughter while she was voluntarily giving you $427,000? I asked. What exactly didn't you mean? We were going to pay it back. With what money? The money I was sending you? You've been using my support payments to make minimum payments on credit cards you fraudulently opened in my name. Dad found his voice. You're really going to send your own parents to prison? I'm going to let the FBI decide whether to prosecute. But yes, if it comes to that, I'll testify. But we're your parents. Mom cried. We raised you. We gave you life. And I gave you $427,000. Which apparently wasn't enough. I picked up my briefcase. You wanted to talk about sacrifice? About giving back? I gave you over $600,000 when you count the stolen money. I sacrificed 8 years of savings, investments, and financial security to keep you afloat. And you never once said thank you. Instead, you sat at family dinners and told everyone I never help. That I never sacrifice. That I only care about myself. We didn't know how much you were giving, Dad said weakly. You knew exactly how much. You deposited every check. You cashed every Venmo payment. You just convinced yourselves it was owed to you. That you deserved it because you were parents. Aunt Carol finally spoke. Linda Thomas, is this true? All of it. Mom couldn't look at her. My God, Aunt Carol whispered. How could you? We were desperate, Dad said. We made mistakes. We can make this right. How? I asked. By paying me back? You owe me $616,000. Where will you get that money? Silence. That's what I thought. The FBI contacted my parents 3 days after Christmas. Special Agent Mitchell and Special Agent Torres arrived at their house to interview them about the fraud charges. My parents called me immediately afterward, panicking. I didn't answer. They called 7 more times. I declined each one. Finally, Dad sent a text. The FBI was here. They have evidence of everything. Please call us. We need to talk about this. I texted back. All communication should go through your attorney. They hired a criminal defense lawyer who contacted David Richardson within a week. The situation was simple. My parents were facing multiple federal felony charges. Wire fraud. Identity theft. Bank fraud. The U.S. attorney was prepared to seek 15 to 25 years in prison, unless I was willing to work out a deal. Ms. Morgan, their attorney, called me directly. Your parents understand they were wrong. They're prepared to make full restitution and accept consequences. But they're asking for mercy. They're asking you not to pursue the maximum prosecution. What are you proposing? Guilty pleas to reduce charges. Probation instead of prison time. Full restitution paid over time. Your parents would sign confessions, enter payment plans, and do whatever you require. How would they pay back $616,000? They'd sell the house. They'd both get full-time jobs. They'd make monthly payments for as long as it takes. I thought about my parents in federal prison. 20 years behind bars. Missing the rest of their lives. Part of me thought they deserved it. But a larger part of me just wanted them to understand what they'd done. I'll consider it, I said. But I have conditions. 2 weeks later we met with attorneys present. My parents, their lawyer David Richardson, and my attorney Sharon Chin. Here are my terms, I said. You plead guilty to fraud charges. Federal charges with reduced sentencing recommendations. 5 years probation instead of prison. Both parents nodded eagerly. You sell the house. The equity after paying off your mortgage is approximately $180,000. That money goes directly to me as partial restitution. But where will we live? Mom asked. You'll rent. Like millions of people do. You'll downsize. You'll live within your means for the first time in your lives. Okay, Dad said quietly. Second, you both get full-time jobs. Real jobs with steady paychecks. You work until you can make meaningful payments on the debt. We're 64 years old. Then you'll work until you're 74 if that's what it takes. You committed federal crimes. You're lucky I'm not letting you go to prison. They nodded. Third, you enter a payment plan. After selling the house, you owe me $436,000. You'll pay $2,500 monthly for the next 15 years. If you miss a payment, the plea deal is void and I proceed with full federal prosecution. We can do that, Dad said. Fourth, you write a letter to every family member who was at Christmas dinner. You explain what you did. The theft. The lies. The guilt trips while you were stealing from me. You tell them the truth about who provided what in this family. Mom's face crumpled. That's so humiliating. Good. You humiliated me for 8 years. Now it's your turn. We'll do it, Dad said firmly. And fifth, this is non-negotiable. You go to therapy. Financial therapy. You learn why you spent beyond your means. Why you felt entitled to my money. Why you lied about sacrifice while taking everything I gave you. You do the work to understand what you did wrong. We will, Mom said. We promise. The papers were signed 2 days later. My parents sold their house within 3 weeks. The $180,000 in proceeds reduced their debt to $436,000. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Aurora. Rent, $1,400 monthly. Dad got a job at Costco. Mom got a job at Target. Combined income, $68,000 annually. After taxes, rent, and basic expenses, they had exactly $2,500 monthly to pay me back. Not a dollar more for extras. No restaurants. No vacations. No new furniture. The first payment arrived on time. So did the second. And the third. 15 years of payments ahead of them. The letters to family members went out 1 week after the plea deal. Aunt Carol called me crying. Rachel, I had no idea. All those years they were taking from you while complaining you weren't helping. I'm so sorry we believed them. It's okay, I said. They were convincing. You're so much more generous than they deserved. Maybe. But I didn't want to become bitter. I wanted them to face the truth and make it right. 3 months after the plea deal, Mom sent me a text. We finished our first month of financial therapy. Our therapist says we have entitlement mentality and victim complex. He's right. We're working on it. Thank you for not giving up on us. I didn't respond immediately. But later that week I texted back, I'm glad you're doing the work. 6 months in, Dad called me. Rachel, can we meet for coffee? No expectations. Just coffee. We met at a Starbucks near my apartment. They looked different. Older, yes. But also humbler. Dad wore a Costco employee vest. Mom's manicure was gone, her hair simply styled. Thank you for meeting us, Dad said. What did you want to talk about? We wanted to apologize. In person. Not because we have to. Because we need to. Mom's eyes were red. We spent your entire life telling you that you owed us. That we sacrificed for you. That you should be grateful. But the truth is you sacrificed for us. You gave us everything and we never even said thank you. We were so focused on being victims, Dad added. On being martyrs. On maintaining the story that we'd given up everything for you. We couldn't see what you were actually doing. Because acknowledging it meant admitting we needed you, Mom said. And we wanted to be the strong ones. The parents. The ones who sacrifice. Working at Target has been humbling, she continued. Standing on my feet for 8 hours taking orders from managers half my age living paycheck to paycheck. This is what real sacrifice looks like. And you were doing this for us, sacrificing your financial future, while we stole from you. We don't expect forgiveness, Dad said. We just wanted you to know that we finally understand. We finally see what you did. And we're sorry we were blind for so long. I sat with that for a moment. Thank you for saying that. Can we rebuild? Mom asked. Not right away. We know trust takes time. But eventually, I agreed. If you keep doing the work. We will, they both said. 18 months after Christmas dinner, my parents have made every payment on time. They've attended therapy weekly. They've lived within their means. They've worked their jobs without complaint. We have coffee once a month now. The conversations are different, real, honest, without the performance of martyrdom. Last week, Dad told me they'd saved $3,000 in an emergency fund. It's the first time we've had savings in 30 years. That's great, Dad. It feels good. Knowing we earned it. Knowing it's ours because we worked for it, not because someone gave it to us or we stole it. Mom added, our therapist says we're making progress. We're learning to separate our worth from our financial status. Learning that being parents doesn't entitle us to our children's money. I'm proud of you, I said. And I meant it. They still owe me $391,000. 13 more years of payments. But they're doing the work. They're changing. They're becoming people I can respect. And that's worth more than the money. Because this was never really about the $616,000. It was about seeing the truth. About acknowledging reality. About understanding that real sacrifice isn't a weapon you use to guilt people. It's something you give freely out of love. My parents sacrificed their comfortable lies. They sacrificed their victim narrative. They sacrificed their pride. And in doing so they finally learned what sacrifice actually means.